Welcome in. Welcome to Pinkies and Pinups. I hope everybody knows, and if they don't know, they're about to know. October is the month of domestic violence. It's where you can be supportive, help with being knowledgeable about resources, all kinds of amazing things. We're going to have a quick intro. Please hit that like and subscribe button on your way in. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in. Get to know. Hi, just Robbie. It's good to see you. Oh, Lady O, if you can hear me, can you please type a one in chat? Sometimes I'm accidentally muted and I don't even know it. I know, silly me. So, the month of October is to support victims of domestic violence, domestic slayings, and brutal and for unseeable incidences happen all too often. A Washington Post found that nearly half of the women who were murdered during the past decade were like Purnell and Cisneros, killed by a current or former intimate partner. In close analysis of 5 cities, about third of male killers were known to be potential threat ahead of the attack. In St. Louis, Sierra Jackson filed for a restraining order, claiming in court documented and documents of her ex-boyfriend Victor Whittier, who had sent a series of threatening text messages and then lurking outside of her home. Jackson, whom was 24, had previously called the police on Whittier, broke into her apartment, and ransacked it. But she chose not to pursue criminal charges. According to the authorities, she had asked her property manager whether if she could break her lease or not. And this happens a lot. They won't let you out of a lease. If they do, you'll be charged until another person leases that area. Thank you, Just Robbie. Hi, Arctic Wolf. Welcome in. So she had asked her property manager to break her lease, and, they said no. She escaped with her 11-year-old brother, whom she was raising. She said that she had had physical abuse by the respondent before. Jackson wrote in court papers adding that she knew that he was capable of doing so. On August 2nd, 2017, a judge granted Jackson a year-long restraining order against Whittier. He was to have no contact with her and needed to stay at least 2,500 feet away at all times. 11 days later, Jackson was dead. Authorities say Whittier shot Jackson 4 times through her apartment window. The restraining order ordered lying atop a microwave just a few feet from her body. When investigators asked whether Jackson had trouble with her brother or anyone in the documents, Jackson's death came with a clear warning sign, a killing, a killing that played out in slow motion. And there was multiple documentations of this happening. Jackson's death became a clear warning sign, a warning and a killing that played out in very slow motion as those law enforcement agents and courts had filed to stop whether that this was going to be inevitable or not. A Washington Post analysis of 4,484 killings of women in 47 major cities, United States cities, during the past decade found that nearly half of those women were killed. Half. That means like 1 out of 2 women that file for case documented protective orders, etc., end up dead. 1 out of every 2, 5 out of every 10. It's good to see you, Arctic Wolf. 50 out of every 100. That's just insane. And these people die. These women or men, it can be either or, die at the hands of their intimate partner. In some cases, they're among the most brutal deaths. So, for those of you that like to follow true crime, if you've ever noticed that some of the most brutal murders are those from a partner, an ex-partner, inter-partner violence, or family member like a brother, a mother, son, father, etc. In Fort Worth, Las Vegas, Oklahoma City, San Diego, St. Louis, 30% of 280 men implicated in a domestic violence killing and had previously restraining orders against them and had been convicted of domestic abuse and violent crimes, including murder, the Post found. So that means that there's a long history, or at least a building history, of these things happening. Killings of intimate partners are often and especially brutal, involving close encounters such as stabbing, strangulation, and beatings. Nearly a quarter of 2,051 women killed in the intimate partners were stabbed, compared to the fewer than 10% of all homicides. 18% of women who were killed by their partners were attacked with a blunt object or no weapon, compared to 8% of other homicide victims. While guns was used in 80% of all of other deaths, just over half of those women were killed as a result of domestic violence. Violent choking is almost entirely confined to fatal domestic attacks on women. While fewer than 1% of all homicides result in strangulation, 6% of women killed by intimate partners die in this manner. Those who attempt to strangle an intimate partner are far more likely to later commit extreme acts of violence. Police and researchers say that many law enforcement believe that is a strong indicator of abusive relationship that could turn fatal. If you have been in a case where you have been strangled or hit with a blunt object. Gun violence of all other murders are 80%. Gun violence by murders by an intimate partner is 57%. All other murders from a sharp object, knife, etc., is only 10%. And those same murders that are done by interpartner violence is 22%. Blunt object strangulation or no weapon was only 8% in all other murders, where that's 18% in intimate partner violence. Now, this analysis has been a part of a year-long effort to examine homicide in major America cities and the extent to which authorities have confirmed. At a time when the national homicide rate nears a historic low, failed to solve the killings unlike other types of partner and homicide violence. Domestic slayings often involve killers who leave a long trail of warning signs or signals that of their intent, in some cases threatening to kill their victims. Domestic violence cases are complex and involving victims who are reluctant to report the abuse for fear of further abuse or losing their financial support. Those who do seek help often encounter fracture of legal networks, and this is like getting through that red tape. Some people call it yellow tape. It's getting through that red tape, and it's not easy. You have to know what to file, who to speak with, and it can become like this huge rat race, like going around in circles, like you don't get anywhere. Some of the most dangerous times are actually after you have filed for a restraining order. That first 24 to 48 hours is the most lethal time for the partner that filed the report. Those who do seek help often encounter this very, very fractured legal network and lack of cohesive support. Many victims are killed even after police and courts have stepped in. The analysis of domestic killings draw on public record and news reports, and it probably understands how often American women are killed by boyfriends, husbands, and ex-partners because some cities offer very scant information and any information about their homicide cases. The tally counts murder suicides, which some prosecutor offices do not have in their data sets because with the killers dead, there's no criminal case to pursue. In Fort Worth, out of 40 homicides, 55% of them were men with previous public history of abuse or violence, where there was only 45 that didn't. In Las Vegas, out of 119 homicides, 35% was with men who had a history of abuse. 65% did not. In Oklahoma City, out of 47 homicides, 32% were men with a history of abuse and domestic violence, where 68% did not have that history. San Diego, out of 28 homicides, 36% had the previous history, where 64 did not. And in St. Louis, Missouri, out of 46 homicide cases, 37% had the history of abuse and violence, and 63% did not. The Post data aligns with the recent research into murders of women, including the reports from Northeastern University criminology professor James Allen Fox, who used FBI data from the police departments to find 44.8% of women killed from 2007 to 2016 were killed by an intimate partner. Fox has found that 5% of all men killed from 2007 to 2016 were killed by an intimate partner. That is insane. Fox said that said in an interview that this is difficult to determine whose actions might lead from abuse to fatal violence. You know, if they would listen to the women that have spoken up, they probably wouldn't have such a hard time discerning that. Because a lot of times we're told, if you leave, we're going to kill you. It's very simple. If you turn us in, we're going to beat the shit out of you. It's very simple. But they don't listen. Welcome in, Arky. It's good to see you. There is numerous motives for intimate partner homicide, Fox says. Previously acts of violence, a separation, a divorce. These are all precursors, and it's the most dangerous time. It really is. When you're leaving an abuser, that is the most dangerous time for you. Period. Authorities and those who have worked with victims in intimate partner violence say the most glaring signs that a relationship could turn fatal are often the elusiveness of law enforcement. And when law enforcement doesn't step in and put their foot down, those women end up dead. So, a lot of these cases, there's been record of report. And a lot of these cases are caused from things like jealousy, separation. You don't want to be with them anymore. And this goes the opposite direction also with men. Um, when a man has tried to leave a situation and the woman is very jealous or is saying no, women are just as abusive. I, okay, maybe not quite, but a lot are. I think it's hidden a lot. They get away with it a lot more. Authorities and those who work with victims of interpartner violence, I think that they should have like this setup to where they go through special training just to deal with victims. Because if they don't have victim familiarity, they're not going to know how to react or behave or, how to help out those victims. A lot of them get battered women syndrome where they don't have the ability to just get up and leave. Like they feel trapped in that situation. Sorry, chat. I had to scoot you guys over, hun, so I could see you. Okay. We have a lot of repeat victims and repeat offenders because, for example, just one sec. For example, it may be the victim only source, like, is the babysitter. So if you're dating somebody and they're your only source for a babysitter, a lot of violence and abuse can come from this because you don't have anyone else to turn to. Yes. And then it like just keeps repeating and repeating. So, Lieutenant Amy Parker, commander of the Family Violence and Sex Crimes Unit in St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. The victim comes back and says, but I love him. I don't want to prosecute. And unfortunately, if it happens again, we revisit it again. And then by then it could be too late. On the second or third time, it may be they end up dead. Now, I know there is a lot of states that even if the woman denies to prosecute, the state can pick up the case. Tracy Pryor, Chief Deputy District Attorney in San Diego County, said about 40% of the defendants in domestic violence homicide cases in her office prosecuted from 2007 to 2017 and they all had prior criminal record. You wish you had a crystal ball because no prosecutor wants to see that same perpetrator doing it again and again and again. But in the most basic step authorities instruct abused women to take is filing a restraining order. Now, if you watched my previous stream, out of the 60,000 referrals, only 1,800 restraining orders were given. And I know from history that only about half of those will stay to be a permanent order. They will be dropped by the time you have court. So out of those 60,000 people, only around 800 were fully protected. And that is ridiculous amount, like ridiculously low amount of people that are being protected. If they had 60,000 women or children or men come in and say, "Hey, I need help." That doesn't those numbers are so skewed. So very skewed. One prosecutor tells women who request an order to do so with a backpack and a plan. Right. What if you have animals? What if you have kids? All your stuff. It's not so easy. It's not so easy. It's not a bulletproof vest, Karen Parker said, President CEO of Safe Alliance, and which it helps abused women in Charlotte, where half or 60 out of 119 women were killed from 2007 to 2017. They were murdered by an intimate partner. According to the post analysis, he can still come after you. It's a legal tool. And legally, there's not much that can happen until the order is violated. Exactly. And even if the order is violated, the first offense is a misdemeanor. The second offense is like a gross misdemeanor. The third offense becomes a felony depending on what state you're in. Again, another reason we shouldn't have the 3-strike rule. And legally, there is not much can happen until this order has been violated and they can do something about it. It's a slap on the hand and sent on your way. That's why people don't think that there's anything that they can really do. It's only a piece of paper, and they are threatened and they are in danger. And we get to tell them, hey, go get an order of protection. But it's really just a piece of paper. For instance, the lady in the beginning of the story, he wasn't within so many feet, he shot her through a window. You know what I mean? It's craziness. Thank you, Arkansas. So I'm going to share this with you. This beautiful family. Beautiful family. Breaks my heart. Here we go. So, racing against reluctance. Domestic homicide often occurs after there have been many chances to intervene and abuse and violence have escalated. The abused, the one who must initiate a cry for help, often doesn't want to participate in the legal process. That will harm the abuser. And a lot of times the abuser is the one that's taking care of them or the father of their children. And they just, it's tough sometimes. Art Clayton, the chief of the Intimate Partner Violence Unit in the District Attorney's Office in Tarrant County, Texas, which includes Fort Worth, said law enforcement officials struggle with repetitive abuse cases because some of the victims are reluctant to help, even as a violence against them increases. Most domestic violence are not cooperative. Most domestic violence victims are not cooperative, Clayton said. Minerva Cisneros from Fort Worth believed her abusive situation would change and didn't want to cooperate. And a lot of times we just want to hear that, I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Wishful thinking, right? With police and prosecutors, because she thought it would hurt her partner and cause her to lose custody of her children. Cisneros arrived at a Fort Worth hospital August of 2014 with a bloody nose and a busted lip with strangulation marks on her neck and blood in her eyes. Her common law husband, Arturo Sigala, allegedly tried to strangle her until she lost consciousness. She was 8 months pregnant with her couple's third child. Thank you, Arky. Allison's Allison kicks a ball to Alex at their grandparents' home in Fort Worth. The father was convicted in their mother's Christmas Day murder. Wow. And he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. The hospital contacted authorities, but the case, one among hundreds and others at that time, stalled because a Fort Worth police detective assigned could not reach Cisneros, who was not cooperating with the investigation, according to Fort Worth police. As the criminal case waited, records showed the Child Protective Service officials opened a separate inquiry into Cisneros, alleging that she had filed to protect her children from witnessing the abuse she'd suffered. She and Sagala were required to enter couples counseling, and she took a class in how to manage her husband's violent behavior. That shit shouldn't even exist. They should be like gone out of there. Just saying, it doesn't get better. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. It doesn't get better. Tarrant County prosecutor, family members, and authorities said Cisneros became concerned that she could lose custody. Child Protective Service officials did not respond to her request for comment. And now, if you have a protective order, Child Protective Service is going to say, you have a protective order, you're fine. Just a heads up. About 6 months after Cisneros was hospitalized, the assault allegations against Sagala were resigned to another Fort Worth detective who spoke with Cisneros about her abuse. Benjamin of the department's Special Victims Unit. The detective also spoke with Sagala, who confirmed that he had hit Cisneros multiple times, but denied that he had strangled her into unconsciousness. Wow. But there was marks on her neck and blood in her eyes, which totally depicts strangulation. He told police he had been drunk at the time. Well, then he probably doesn't remember, but that's not an excuse. Authorities acquired an arrest warrant almost immediately, and Sagala was taken into custody days later. Police said Cisneros then visited the Tarrant County District Attorney's office, and she said she was adamant that she was safe. She wanted her husband back home and the criminal case against him dismissed. A grand jury listened and did not indict him. In the early hours of Christmas Day, 2015, just more than a year after the attempted strangulation, Sagala called 911. Something happened to my wife, and she needs help, he told the operator. I sat down, and a gun went off. Sagala, who had been in the county illegally, jumped in the couple's car and fled to Mexico. Shortly after the police arrived at the couple's home, which was decorated with Christmas and the smell of brisket and pozole, a Mexican stew Cisneros had cooked hours earlier. Cisneros and her 15-month-old daughter, Allison, were lying side by side in a bed. Cisneros was dead, shot once in the chest. Allison was alive, her hair caked with her mother's blood. The shell casing of the gun was missing. Sagala was later arrested at the U.S. border and was put on trial, where he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 50 years in prison. The couple's children are now 7 and 6 and 4 and are in the care of the Cisneros family. Sagala's lawyer, Richard Henderson, said his client's case looked more like an accidental shooting than a murder to me. The fact didn't fit the classic domestic violence, he said. That's BS, because she had made multiple reports previous to this. Sagala has appealed his case. His appellate lawyer declined to comment. Authorities see the case in hindsight and having been avoidable, one that was complicated by fraught relationship, a mother concerned about losing her children, and the lack of cooperating witness. And this is where the state has to step in and take control, because a battered woman is not going to go against the perpetrator. If she still has those emotions, she has to come to those terms that she doesn't want to deal with it anymore. I reflect upon all the missteps made across all of the agencies involved in Minerva Cisneros' case, and I realized that her murder was potentially preventable. Bangs said, "We know that we cannot help or prevent violence against people we don't know about. Minerva was not one of those people. She had made it very clear. There's the little babies." Maria Cisneros is raising her grandchildren, Haiti, Left, and Allison. So I think this is Haiti and this is Allison, as well as her brother in Fort Worth. The edge of homicide, attempted strangulation, as was seen in the Cisneros case, has rapidly gained attention as a strong indicator that an abusive relationship could turn fatal. Researchers, including Jacqueline Campbell, a nurse and professor at Johns Hopkins University, who has studied intimate partner violence for decades, have found that women is more likely to have been killed by an intimate partner who has attempted to strangle her in the past. Campbell said that many women don't know that medical authorities and police consider the act especially violent and potentially precursor to murder. Welcome in, Jim. Strangulation is one common factor that emerges so very, very often, says Sergeant Craig Burnham, professor or supervisor of the domestic violence unit at the Charlotte Police Department. The department has trained all of its members, as well as prosecutors, judges, and healthcare providers, to spot signs of strangulation, which include the bloodshot eyes, the sore throat, the confusion, etc. So I know we talk a lot about like domestic violence, and we talk a lot about like in the very, very large group that we resonate in true crime. And when you see the blood in the eyes, it's always like that's been strangulation. Hi, Orgy. The next goal is to create strangulation task force to identify and prosecute and track men who attack women that way. Attempted strangulation is the edge of homicide. And typically it's yeah. If they've done it once, they'll do it again. If they've hit you once, they'll hit you again. I'm feeling okay, Org. A former San Diego city attorney and president and co founder of the Alliance for Hope, which works with domestic violence and sexual assault victims. His organization trains first responders and doctors to spot the signs so they can intervene. Our goal is to say, as soon as you hear, he choked me, bells and whistles will be going off. Benjamin of Fort Worth Police Department said men who tried strangling have been linked to extreme violence, including against police officers. In my opinion, any man who becomes so angry at a loved one that he could strangle them is a man who is predisposed I can't say it. Predispositioned, in other words, predisposed to murder, Benjamin said. Susan Parsons, a Fort Worth real estate agent, long feared that her husband, John St. Angelo, would kill her. The couple married in their 40s. They had known each other since their childhood, and the Parsons endured relentless violence during their 3-year marriage. St. Angelo refused to let her leave the house, dragged her from the shower by her hair, assaulted her because her cell phone was locked, and tried to strangle her a couple once on the vacation in Mexico, according to her son, Joel Bishop. Thank you very much, Org. Thank you, Orgy, for the $5. Predisposition. I know I was having a hard time saying it. Predisposed. I don't know why I was having a hard time pronouncing that. So funny. It's just like some words get stuck. I still have a hard time saying like the Indianapolis is yeah. St. Angelo, once an affluent developer, depleted his savings. The couple defaulted on their mortgage, and St. Angelo started using drugs and gambling, said Banks, the prosecutor. It's very disturbing to watch case after case unfold and know that there was a bunch of warning signs that are so easy to read. Thank you, love. St. Angelo moved out in May of 2013. Parsons served him with his divorce papers, requested a temporary restraining order. And in a lot of states, when you file for a divorce, you automatically now get a protective order. Because I think that the law system is figuring out that when someone files a divorce, it's not always like a mutual agreement that you need to get divorced. Sometimes it's they have to kind of, how do I explain it? It's very combative. And so in some states, they hand out a protective order during that process because it can be so volatile. In December of 2013, Parsons called the police to report that a prowler had set her swimming pool equipment on fire. Prosecutors said that Parsons was confident that it was San Angelo who was the perpetrator, but police did not have enough evidence to charge him, Banks said. Days later, Fort Worth police found Parsons' body slumped on her office floor at work. Her hands were covered in blood and the defense wounds, half of red polished fingernails ugh, ripped off. Sorry. Her hands were covered in blood and defensive wounds, half of her red polished fingernails was ripped off and laying on the carpet nearby. Besides a blood smeared necklace and interlocking hearts, prosecutors said St. Angelo stabbed Parsons about 2 dozen times. He was arrested the following day after attempting suicide and was later convicted of murder, receiving a life sentence. His lawyer, Kathy Lothrop, said in an interview that Parsons was an aggressor in the violent encounter. So, where they were trying to say that she was the aggressor, like, a lot of it doesn't make sense. And that St. Angelo stabbed her in self defense. Carolyn Parnell and her husband Don have raised their grandsons Austin on the left and Easton in their home in Norman, Oklahoma, since their mother was killed in 2016. Nick Oxford from the North from for the Washington Post. Yeah, stay away from bullies. No bullies. Unless they're cute little bully dogs. This is a story of Daddy Shop Mama. One of the biggest obstacles to preventing domestic violence homicide is the fractured system that aims to deal with domestic strife. In some cities, women have to navigate multiple offices, desperate bureaucracies, and opaque processes to seek help. I hear Doggo. When Kimberly Garrett began working as victim services coordinator for Oklahoma City Police Department in 2011, she was shocked by what she found. The onus was on victims to figure out where they needed to go for help, and this is that red tape I was talking about. And women often had to drive all over the city, to a courthouse one day, to the police station, to social workers a week later. Some women would just give up. And if some of those women are where they don't have a vehicle to get around, it makes it near to impossible. According to the Post analysis, 47 of 104 women were killed during the past decade in Oklahoma City were murdered by interpartner violence. Garrett worked to open Polymer on one-stop resources for victims of domestic violence and sexual assault abuse. Known, excuse me, sorry. Known for Family Justice Center. In February 2017, people began asking for help filing restraining orders, seeking criminal charges, and finding social services for the building open before the building even opened. There are 130 family justice centers nationwide. That's it? 130 family justice centers nationwide. That is not enough at all. According to the Alliance of Hope, that were opened in at least 20 counties. Now, I wonder if that is just, that's nationwide. That's not even statewide. That's like throughout our whole nation. Many offer counseling, childcare, and allow domestic violence victims to attend court via video monitor so they do not have to be in the same room as their abusers, and the shift to make the victims feel safer. And one of the huge things is when you have to go into court against an offender, that is unnerving to have to be present in their presence. Like, you don't, especially when you've been away from them for a long time, like, you don't want to have to be in their presence. You end up with the PTSD, CPTSD, and it just throws you into a frenzy. There there are people who have been in the field for a long time and they're comfortable with the status quo and they feel like agencies should be isolated. I think at the end of the day, it's made it really hard for victims. And I think so too, because I've been in that position and it's not easy at all. Cutting through the red tape is a pain in the ass. Advocates also battle the perception that domestic violence is shameful and should remain a private family matter. No, I think it needs to be made public because if, for instance, if it happens to me, if it doesn't become public, then that person is going to be running rampant, and it's going to happen again to another person, again to another person, again to another person. No, they need to make that public. Like they do SA offenders, they should have like domestic violence offenders. 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it was a hidden secret. Yeah, that stuff was brushed under the rug. And now we're finding that it's still difficult to talk about. Mm, it's getting easier. The CEO and the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, we don't want to talk about it until there's an event. As a result, Cisneros' death and others like in Fort Worth area, Tarrant County District Attorney Sharon Wilson was significantly changed in how the office handles domestic cases, putting Texas County at the vanguard of the new approaches to prevention. Now, I do have to say, Texas is one of those states that if you get charged with domestic violence, even if you flee, you're gone. There's no statute of limitations. That case will sit there until they catch you and you will be brought back in. It doesn't just disappear. She creates a specialized domestic violence division which handles the office's most serious offenses. It has 450 to 600 cases at any given time in the county's biggest city, Fort Worth. 43% of women killed in the past decade were murdered by their intimate partners. According to the post analysis, 40 out of 94 women, female, homicide victims. Wilson's office stopped accepting requests for women to drop charges. And I believe that's where I think that is one of the places that they pick up the case for you. You don't even have to file the crime. You don't have to be the witness. They will pick up the case and they will tend to it. There's no saying, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this." Thank you, org. Yes, the system is very broken. It's craziness. It now brings forward cases even if the women don't want to cooperate, evaluating the strength or weaknesses of the case through evidence such as medical records, photographs taken by forensic investigators, and 911 calls. And the approach is known as evidence based prosecution. It's increasingly in use nationwide. And I believe so. Like I think most states now, they will pick up a case regardless if the woman doesn't want to or the man doesn't want to do it. Yeah, they don't want to prosecute. The state still picks it up. The oldest one looked up said, "Daddy shot mama, didn't he?" Wow. And I said, "Yes, baby, he did." Oh, this is sad. Oh, there are some people who, quite frankly, just aren't ready. But if we can piece together a case in her absence, or piece together a case even without her wanting us to, our responsibility to protect her and the community and the family, said Spencer B. Merriweather III, the district attorney in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina, which includes Charlotte. In February 2017, 6 Texas counties, including Tarrant, received pilot funding from domestic violence teams to intervene in cases like Cisneros. Law enforcement officials and victim support organizations meet monthly to discuss cases. District Judge Molly Westford built a docket entirely for high-risk cases and domestic violence killings in Tarrant County and have fallen since the changes were implemented. "We're trying to keep people alive," Westfall said. "It's very disturbing in which cases after which to watch a case after case unfold and know that there were a bunch of warning signs that aren't easy to read. Police departments across the county use lethality assessments." Now, I'm sure you remember when I was explaining my personal story that they did the assessment, and it was a 10 out of 10. And now they're using that same assessment in these particular types of cases. Assessments to gauge the danger of a woman in an abusive relationship faces. The connected victims who score high risk to advocates while still at the crime scene. The assessment consists of questions including whether the abuser owns or has a gun, whether the victim has moved out in the past year, or whether the death threat was made, whether a death threat has been made, said Campbell, the St. John Hopkins, who developed the assessments. I think that's very cool. You know what? That is amazing because a lot of times they don't do that and then they're reoffenders. Because the offender only gets locked up for 24 to 48 hours, depending on how many times the offender has offended, right? And if you end up moving around a lot and the offender is following you, then the offender is offending in multiple towns that are not communicating. And so that personal town only thinks that it's happened once. They also need to make like a national, communication system that the offenders that do that type of offense go into one database so they will know that if it's happened previous at all. I think that would help knock down a lot of this. Get to know. If she is in high danger, high risk, and she is told you are high risk, and being told is an important part of the process. And I think that because it kind of helps you understand, okay, well, I may not survive this next time. So it says Campbell says women often underestimate the risk of being killed. And we do until it happens or until you've come really close to it. By the time Desiree Parnell began making a move to protect herself, she was already facing extreme danger. In December 2016, Parnell contemplated filing a restraining order against Zachary Blake and the father of their two children. According to her mother, Miss Caroline here, Desiree Parnell met Blake in 2007 and fell for him quickly. Red flag. She gave birth to their son in 2009. So that means they were like together for a year and then she was pregnant for 9 months. And yeah, that's really quick. She gave birth to their son in 2009 and Blake wanted her to stop working, her mother said. Control. Here's the babies. It was his way of controlling. Imagine that. He took everything, her self-esteem. He took everything, her self-esteem, everything away from her. Parnell gave birth to their second son in 2011 against Blake's wishes, got a job at an urgent care clinic in Oklahoma City. Now he's mad. Parnell thrived, eventually managing two clinics. Wow, so she was really doing good for herself. She was starting to do good for herself. That's really going to upset him, especially if he's having control issues. Definitely. What's the matter, Orgy? But her relationship deteriorated and emotional abuse began to escalate to physical attacks. Her mother said in 2016, Parnell found Blake using heroin in the couple's bathroom and left him. Her mother said he sent threatening text messages that she had reported to police, but her mother said that the threats didn't rise to the level of a crime. And this is what it disturbs me, even in this space, in the YouTube space. Oh, Org. I hope you're all right, Orgy. Email me. So even in this space, we have, you know, file complaints, whatever. Law enforcement's like, oh, it's not that serious. It's not compelling enough to them when they really don't know. And they really need to take heed because, things happen. Things happen. Parnell started putting her life back together. She coached her son's baseball team and she tried to keep Blake involved in the boys' life. Oh, see, it's hard when you have children with the abuser because you really can't remove the children from the abuser unless there's a conviction of some sort. And I'm assuming this is in the beginning. So, this is where it's just now starting to get really heated. So she can't even disassociate herself from the situation. So one night he asked Blake, or she asked Blake to take the sons to a wrestling event. He took them to a friend's apartment instead. Do what? And Caroline Purnell said her daughter realized that she no longer trusted Blake and wanted to put legal distance between them. And she told them she wanted to file for a restraining order. She also has known as a victim protective order, a VPO. So a VPO is the same as a restraining order. I believe this is in Oklahoma. Each state has their own. They have TPOs, VPOs, ROs. They all have like little different nicknames and such. He told her that if you got a VPO, I will kill you, and I will kill you myself. That sounds familiar. We just thought he was just blowing air. He was like he always did. Though she knew a little bit about the process, Desiree Parnell decided that in a week to seek that protective order and to get help of a friend who was a police officer. Her mother said that they had planned to do so shortly after Parnell took care of a few things at work. So Carolyn Purnell said that coworkers saw Desiree abruptly run out of the clinic. She got in the car and Blake was hiding inside. Oh no. Carolyn Purnell said that Parnell drove around the strip mall lot before getting out of the car. Blake remained inside, aimed a gun out the driver's window, and shot her in the head, killing her instantly. He then killed himself, according to the Oklahoma City Police report. Desiree Parnell died December 7th, 2016. A public viewing was 3 days later on what would have been her 31st birthday. Her parents decided to have a closed casket. Carolyn Parnell and her husband are now raising the couple's sons, who are 9 and 7, and they are doing well despite the trauma. When she told both of them what happened, well, basically what happened to their parents, they instinctively knew that their father had hurt their mother. Yes, children can tell. The oldest one looked up and said, "Daddy shot mommy, didn't he?" And I said, "Yes, baby, he did." Where things went Ari. Last year, San Diego was the safest of America's largest city in terms of violent crime, according to the FBI, but it has long-standing problem with domestic homicides. The post-analysis shows that 51% of women killed in the city during the past decade were murdered by an intimate partner, at the highest of any city analyzed. While some jurisdictions are focused on the precursors to homicide, San Diego County has made headway in its focus on domestic violence by also carefully examining the killings afterwards. Each time a person in the county is killed by an intimate partner, representatives from law enforcement, social services, the medical field, schools, and military gather and try to determine where things went awry. The group is known as the Fatality Review Team. The District Attorney Family Protection Unit, which covers sprawling San Diego County, said they prosecuted 94 domestic violence homicides from 2007 to 2017. The number of domestic violence deaths in the county has dropped in the past few years. All egos have to be checked at the door, and we're going to look together as a community and ask, can we prevent that murder? Said Pryor, the chief deputy district attorney. Did the killer have access to weapons? Was there previous escalation of domestic violence? And if so, was it reported? Was there a history of threats? Did the family have contact with the child welfare agencies? Did the victim take out a restraining order? The nation's first family justice center opened in San Diego in 2002, and the fatality review team started 22 years ago. The police department has decided domestic violence unit as a dedicated domestic violence unit. It was on the leading edge of the programs and are now a commonplace around the country, including strangulation, training, and the San Diego County District Attorney's Office received a grant last year to create an algorithm to predict which cases have potential to turn fatality. I think that is amazing. Now, I think that is an amazing idea that they have like this system in place to help, figure out what the fatality rate would be for each individual case and kind of like keep them in that little barrel of, like for research purposes. If I could go back, in Missouri, officials are just beginning to dig deep into domestic violence, and they are battling a pervasive, pervasive? I think it's pervasive problem that exists with all types of crimes. Getting victims and witnesses to cooperate. Yeah, good luck, because not all victims and witnesses are going to want to cooperate when they know that their life is on the line. Oh, goodness. St. Louis Circuit Attorney Kimberly M. Gardner is lobbying to change state laws that require victims to turn over a trove of personal information, including their last known address, when seeking a restraining order. Now, even if you seek a restraining order, you can have your personal information redacted. So the other party does not see it. You can request it as it could be life threatening for you. So just keep aware that you can have that information redacted. Our laws are very lax is how we protect victims and witnesses, she said. The state created a domestic violence fatality review team for St. Louis last month. Wow. They've only had this since last month. That's sad. They should have started this a lot sooner. But I'm glad that they've started it. In St. Louis, 48 of 148 women killed from 2007 to 2017 were murdered by intimate partner violence. So they have a lot less that's going on if it was provable. I guess it just depends on, who's doing the criminal analysis reports for them. In the case of Sierra Jackson, there were 8 possible witnesses outside her apartment building, but prosecutors got only one one of her neighbors to cooperate and testify for the Whittier trial. The other the other witness was Jackson's brother Reggie, who was 11 at the time of the murder. I don't know if kids can, I guess it depends. Like some kids are allowed to um be on the stand. Sometimes it's very traumatizing for children. Very traumatizing. He was playing video games in the apartment when the gunshots were fired. Normally, if there were gunshots in the area, Sierra would tell Reggie to get down, but he did not hear her. Instead, he testified he found his sister's body. Oh, so he did go on the stand. The jury found Whittier guilty for first-degree murder and armed criminal action. His public defender, Erika Wurst, declined to comment on the case. On a Friday morning in November, Whittier was in orange jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled, walked into the courtroom of Circuit Judge Thomas C. Clark for sentencing. That must be this gentleman. A jury found Whittier guilty of first-degree murder and armed criminal action. His public defender, Erika Wurst, declined to comment on the case. On Friday morning in November, Whittier, in an orange jumpsuit with his hands and feet shackled, walked into the courtroom of Circuit Judge Thompson C. Clark II for sentencing. Reggie walked to the witness stand. The teenager opened a piece of paper, held it with both hands, took a deep breath, and read it aloud. You took a person who was like a mother to me, one of my biggest supporters, Reggie said quickly, his face anguished. If I could go back, I wish I could have stopped you. Oh, that's so sad. Reggie Jackson here at 13 reads the statement during November 16th sentencing hearing. About this story, using data on homicides in 50 major U.S. cities compiled by the Washington Post, reporters examined the killings from more than 7,000 women to determine if the alleged killer was the current or former intimate partner of the victim. In about 4,500 of these homicides, reporters were able to determine the suspect's relationship to the victim using news clips and other public records. In more than 2,000 of these cases, the alleged killer was a current or former intimate, partner of the victim. For the study, the Post excludes the death of anyone else who was killed at the time of the intimate partner homicide, such as children or babysitters or bystanders. Reporters further studied nearly 300 intimate partner killings in 5 cities where public records were readily available, looking for signs of previous violence committed by the accused killers, including restraining orders, convictions of violent crimes, and other run-ins with the law enforcement and domestic matters. Such signs existed in more than one-third of the killings. Experts say that number probably underestimates the extent of prior violence because much of it goes unreported to authorities. Facts. Thank you so very much.